Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Fireside Chat with Nashoba Regional School District Superintendent Kirk Downing, facilitated by the Students for Social Justice in collaboration with STOW TV and the Nashoba Area Social Justice Alliance, or NASJA. I'm Abby Morgan, President and founding member of NASJA, resident of STOW, and parent of a center school student. I'd like to start by reading the Land Acknowledgement written by the District Subcommittee DRJ. We acknowledge that this land on which we gather is the unceded land of the Nipmuc, Massachusetts, and Pawtucket people, and that the state of Massachusetts sits on the unceded land of over 12 nations, whose peoples continue to honor the teachings of their ancestors and lift up future generations. We recognize the history of genocide and forced removal of the peoples to whom this land is inherent, and the need to prevent the erasure of this story. We recognize that a land acknowledgement is only the beginning, and that progress is the work ahead. It is working with the Indigenous peoples of this area to push for meaningful change in our institutions, carrying out land-based justice, ensuring accurate histories are taught, and centering Indigenous voices. We acknowledge that these words are woefully inadequate, and for those of us who are guests on this land, we pledge to continue to learn and act in search of truth, transformation, and healing. Through this acknowledgement, we extend respect, honor, and recognition to the Indigenous peoples who continue to live on this land and preserve and share the cultures and values of their people. Thank you to DRJ for crafting this statement. I'd like to thank Mr. Downing for being here today and being so willing to do this with us. Thank you to Jonathan and STOW TV for broadcasting and streaming this event. Thank you to the Students for Social Justice for joining forces with us and for this event. Thank you to Kelly Lawler of NASJA for setting all of this up. And finally, thank you to the students, educators, staff, and parents who submitted questions for tonight's event. A quick background on NASJA. We are a volunteer community group of residents from Stowe, Bolton, Lancaster, and surrounding towns. Our mission is to encourage welcoming and inclusive communities by collaborating with local residents, organizations, and town government to promote social justice. We believe strongly that change at the local level will help create safe and equitable communities for all residents, current and future. If you'd like to join NASJA or learn more about us, join the discussion on our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram or Twitter at Nashoba Area SJA, or visit our website at nashobaareasja.org. You can also email us at nashobaareasja@gmail.com with any questions or concerns. All are welcome. Today is NASJA's second Fireside Chat. In March 2021, we spoke with the newly appointed Police Chief Mike Salisi about equity and justice in policing and police policies, the recording of which is still available on STOW TV's YouTube channel if you'd like to watch it. We're excited to shift the conversation to equity and justice in education with Mr. Downing today. NASJA reached out to Mr. Downing soon after he was hired last summer. Mr. Downing has had his hands full this first year at Neshoba, most notably navigating another school year during a pandemic and researching options for a new high school, all while learning the ins and outs of our district. Personally, I was excited to participate in Neshoba's spring professional development centered on diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism in education. We look forward to working and communicating with Mr. Downing as the district focuses more on DEI moving forward. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce Olivia Huang, a Stowe resident, high school junior, a leader of the Students for Social Justice at the high school. Olivia and her SSJ classmates have collected and curated a list of questions, mostly from students, which we've shared with Mr. Downing in advance. I've only met Olivia in person once, and she gives a great first impression as a thoughtful and intelligent leader, the perfect person to host tonight's question and answer session. But before we see Olivia, the Students of Social Justice would like to share a video about their organization. So welcome, Olivia, and here's a video on SSJ.
Hi, my name is Olivia Huang. I'm the president of the Students for Social Justice Club, SSJ for short, here at Nashoba. Today we would like to share a few things with you.
Our focus is educating and informing the Nashoba community on social justice topics and ideas.
The goals of our club are increasing awareness and education on nuanced topics, as well as facilitating conversation surrounding diversity in curriculum. We also would like to petition for a baseline social justice education for graduates of the Neshoba district and promote equity and inclusion in our school's learning environment.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion can be achieved through many paths. Some of these paths are easily accessible.
Teachers and administrators can create a more inclusive learning environment by actively using gender-neutral language. Not everyone in our community fits into a binary structure of gender, and not everyone in our community uses he/she pronouns. Ways to acknowledge all students by using gender-neutral language are through greetings such as, "How are you all doing today?" and "Hello, wonderful humans." Using language like this creates a more inclusive and welcoming environment for all.
Using inclusive language can also extend to mask wearing in the classroom. Be careful to use language that will not exclude students who may or may not choose to wear a mask.
Schools should keep in mind that not all students have the same access to resources. In order to promote equity in the school environment, schools should provide necessary materials such as pencils, paper, calculators, and other resources conducive to a learning environment.
SSJ thanks all of you for your time and the initiative that you've taken. Let's continue working together to build not only a community, but a future that prioritizes diversity, equity, and inclusion, where all will be welcomed and all will be celebrated. Thank you. Greetings to everyone tuning in today. Thank you for the introduction, Abby. As was said, my name is Olivia Huang. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a junior at Neshoba Regional High School and the president of Students for Social Justice. Students for Social Justice, as you might have seen in the video, is a student organization dedicated to educating the student body and spreading awareness about social justice in our community and beyond. Our Instagram tag is on the screen, so feel free to check it out to see some of our work. I will be the moderator for the chat tonight. To introduce our guest tonight, Kirk Dowding is the superintendent of Nashoba Regional School District. His tenure began on July 1st of 2021. He was the former assistant superintendent of teaching, learning, and innovation of Natick Schools, where he worked since 2019. Thank you, Mr. Dowding, for making time in your busy schedule to be with us tonight. We're really looking forward to hearing your perspective on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our school district. So please welcome Mr. Dowding to the studio. Hi, Mr. Dowding. Oh, I think you're muted, Mr. Dowding. Let's try that again.
Sometimes I act like it's still my first day, right? No, Olivia, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for having me join you all tonight.
Thank you for being here tonight, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. So are you ready for your first question?
Yeah, I did want to share with you that when the whole Fireside chat idea was brought forward to me, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm typically in my stuffy office at home, if anybody's ever watched the meeting. So I'm sitting in my living room with a cup of tea and two wonderful dogs with bad manners. So if in our chat next to the fire here we're interrupted, please forgive me.
Sounds real cozy.
Yeah, so let's start chatting.
All right. So this first question, how have national events shaped your personal and professional equity journey? And what experience do you bring to Nashoba as the new superintendent?
Yeah, Olivia, that's a really great question. And as Abby had mentioned before, these questions were sent to me ahead of time, and they've been spinning around in my head, particularly this first question, because I've been really hung up on the word shaped. And as I think about shaped, I also think about impact. The impact of the events of 2020, I think we continue to feel today. There was a lot of ripple effect that came out of really a very stressful time of, here we are. It's amazing to think about, but those really were the opening days of the pandemic. as it came along in the winter and early spring of 2020. So in that summer, everyone was feeling a lot of tension, a lot of stress to begin with, a lot of uncertainty. We didn't have vaccines on the horizon at that point, and we weren't sure where this was all going. And then, of course, we had a lot of civil unrest, and we had some unjust events happen that frankly were just deplorable. So when I think specifically about George Floyd and the events that happened in Minnesota, I have to tell you, I think about these things quite often, because when I see the footage that we all saw, I see that footage through my perspective, and that is a perspective of a 50-year-old white male that has had 6'4" and a large man. So there are a lot of things that are afforded to me that are just assumed. And for my friends, particularly my friends of color who watched that, they were able to share with me the impact it had on them to see filmed on camera such an unjust murder of an individual. I think it really brought out for the country, but I think for each individual in the company, in the country, to kind of take their own temperature on where they stand when they see such unjust events. And so I would say the way it's sort of shaped or impacted me is just in trying to really develop and deepen my own empathy and perspective for those who are in marginalized populations where unjust events have happened, like we saw in the George Floyd event. But we saw ripple effects from that. We saw civil unrest in many of our cities across the country. We saw the political discourse that surrounded those events. We saw then ultimately through an election that same unrest and an attack by our own citizens on the United States Capitol, and so on and so forth. There is a tension, a societal tension that I'm mindful of on a daily basis, particularly in my role as a superintendent. And in many ways, I think about what my responsibility is as the superintendent. And I think it shaped me in thinking about how to be an attentive listener that is trying to understand the story of those who are on the margins or feel threatened, experience those things in ways that make it hard on their daily lives. So this is a journey, right? I don't sit around thinking about how I can solve the problem as much as I can solve my interactions with individuals and my responsibilities as superintendent to serve other folks. So, those events were very troubling. They continue to be on my mind. My hope is that we as a country have looked at that. We've taken an honest stock of that, particularly with the trial having happened, and all desire to be better. And so that is my hope, is that we can take those awful, evil acts that we all observed and see how we can be better as a country.
Your point about looking at it from an empathetic standpoint is really salient, and I really agree with that, because often we forget that issues that don't directly affect us aren't impacting us in some way, and looking at it from a point of empathy and a point of compassion, it really emphasizes the human nature of these problems, and that it's a human problem, not just a problem that's relegated to one particular group. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Olivia.
All right, this is also a bit of a 2-in-1 question. So what work is the district currently doing to support equity, and what ongoing resources are available to students, staff, and administrators to encourage equity in the district?
Okay, so I think I saw several questions that are actually going to be talking about what we're doing within the district. So I'll try to stay sort of tight to this question. So in terms of what the district is currently doing to support equity, as you heard from Abby at the beginning, we've been providing professional development to our educators. And we're talking about Katie Novak, as a former assistant superintendent in Massachusetts, has done a lot of writing on equity, and Equity by Design is a book read that is happening in our district now. So we're trying to think about how we're designing and putting together our lessons as it is reflected in the curriculum to understand sort of those angles of equity so that we can build a sense of belonging for all of our students. And so, excuse me, I lost my cue here. So when you talk about those ongoing, what are the ongoing resources for students and staff? This is something that we're developing. You're going to hear me talk a little bit several times about the work we're doing for our strategic plan. And that work got started last night. I think the most critical resource we have right now is the human capital and the people. And we're going to talk a little bit about when somebody doesn't feel like they can access that trusted adult. But the trusted adult work, I think, is really critical in terms of being able to reach out and talk with somebody when they're feeling, threatened or marginalized in some form or way.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Downing. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, knowing that I think Molly is up next, knowing that I'm going to have another question to this, I think there's some more to add to that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Downing. So the next student who is introducing our questions is Molly Tobin, who is a member of SSJ and also a junior.
Hi, Molly.
Hello, I'm Molly Tobin, and I'm a junior at Neshoba Regional High School. My question for you, Mr. Downing, are what are the district's short-term and long-term goals? Does the district have a concrete plan for how to accomplish these goals? If so, what is it?
So Molly, when I read your question along with the other one, I thought, okay, how do I talk about these things in terms of the appropriate buckets? So when we're talking about the short-term and long-term goals, this is work that we are actively doing right now. Can I tell you what our short-term and long-term goals are today? No, not in terms of an action plan from the form of the school district. I can tell you in words what they are. The goal here is to ensure that every person in our organization, student, employee, visitor, family member that comes into our school system feels a sense of belonging and a sense of respect in the school system so that they can thrive and be inspired in what we are as a school system. Now, that's rhetoric, if you will. That's talk. In our recent visioning sessions for the high school building project, we actually had some deep discussions about that. And then in my entry plan meetings I had with community members and teachers, a question was about the knowledge of what's going on in the district. And many of our folks in our community gave a response of they didn't know. So what that told me was we need to make our work public, and we need to show people that work. And so just last night, we began our first session of 6 sessions of our strategic planning work that we're doing with a cross section of parents, educators, school committee members, teachers. We've been trying to bring some students along, and we've run into some real competition with spring athletics and after school clubs. And what we're trying to do there is identify what are going to be the key components and actions that we prioritize in a 5-year vision for the school system. And we already know because I've said it. I said it when I presented my entry plan findings to the school committee, and I said it again last night. I can tell you right now, our lead priority is going to be around diversity, equity, inclusion to build a sense of belonging for all students, all staff, all visitors, all families. So we know that this is going to be a major component that comes out of the work that we do in strategic planning. So in the strategic plan, it's going to be broken up for what our vision is for 5 years, but it's going to be disaggregated in step-by-step ways in terms of the types of audits and assessments we conduct, the professional development that we have, the faculty, student, and community conversations that we'll want to plan. So these are all things that are in sort of construction right now, and we'll be giving out the first draft of that strategic plan at the June 15th school committee meeting for our school committee's consideration.
Thank you so much. That sounds amazing. And we're so excited
you,
to see all
Mara.
these plans and everything being put into action. The next person that has a question is Michelle, who is also a junior at the high school. Here is Michelle Nguyen.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So our question was, what are some ways the district works to support its students academically, emotionally, and culturally?
So, Michelle, if I can ask you a sort of a follow-up for clarity, that's such a big question. It's really broad, and I can talk to it in general terms, or would you like me to talk to it from a perspective of equity?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, when I think of academically, emotionally, and culturally supporting students, it's a very broad concept. In other words, there's lots of different angles you can come into this with. And so I'm just wondering, are you looking for sort of a broad answer to like what are the general things that we're doing in the school system, or tighten it more to focusing on those conversations of equity?
I think a broad explanation would be good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, Michelle, the first thing I think about when it comes to supporting students, we have to remember that learning, while learning in many ways is within each individual's mind, it is a social construct, and it is extremely relational. So the most important support for all three of those areas that we can provide is a trusted adult for all of our students to be able to talk to reach out to gain those resources in the terms of ideas and thoughts to handle the types of things that they're thinking about. So we have that, you know, in our teachers and our guidance counselors and in some of our student services departments. But as I think about the way that we are supporting those students, you know, there are academic ways that we do to assess and measure learning, particularly at the younger grades as students are developing their early literacy and early math skills. So we have some measures to help us with that. And then we have some teachers, some specialists, math specialists and reading specialists that can work with students that might be struggling a little bit with the generalized instruction of the classroom and might need something a little bit different or a little bit more. And it then sort of increases in intensity, if you will, that if somebody needs more intense instruction or more frequent instruction, then they might ultimately be working with some of our special education service teachers to deliver the specialized plans that are on their individual education plan. But we also have supports emotionally within our guidance department, our admin mental health teams. I know that this year we're doing a professional development on the early release days with our faculty and staff, particularly on social emotional learning practices. That professional development has been important so that teachers and faculty members can enter into what are maybe some socially difficult kind of situations with an empathetic mindset and some tangible questions and skills to follow up and support students with. And then talking about culturally, I know we have some, it's great that we have clubs like this at the high school where students who are like-minded to talk about a conversation can grow in their thinking and grow in their conversations. So we have a lot of those. When I visited the high school student council to do the Portrait of a Neshoba graduate work, they, many of them in that audience, really referenced high school teachers, particularly in our English department, as being very intentional about the cultural responses and using anti-racist teaching practices in their classrooms to promote cultural diversity. It's an interesting thing in terms of culturally. I'll tell you, one of the things that I do that sometimes generate some questions in the form of emails to me is, as we see holidays arise, I find it in my stance, and I'll just disclose for honesty, I grew up in a Catholic household. So that is our religious tradition in my home here where the lights are on. But I also want to welcome and celebrate those who celebrate other perspectives of religions or choose not to or don't. And so I think it's okay to tell somebody that they wish them their happiness during their holiday season, or if it's a time of reverence and reflection for other religious holidays. So I think there's an aspect of understanding culturally how to support people is not to marginalize or compare one person's cultural or even religious experience, but rather celebrate them because that is their culture, that is where their values lie, and wish them well. Because ultimately that's what we want is for people to be well in the place that they are. So there's, this is a question that there's 1,000 things that we can get to. So that's kind of a 30,000 foot answer for you, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Our next question is from Ziab, and she's also a student at Neshoba Regional High School.
Hi, Ziab.
Hello, it's so nice to see you today.
It's nice to meet you.
Yes, thank you for hosting this event first.
Yes.
So our question is, students are concerned about accessibility issues within the various buildings, such as physical accessibility, like a wheelchair ramp or elevators, and heating and cooling, and also Wi-Fi accessibilities as well. So what plans does the district have to address these issues?
Yet these issues have been talked about quite a bit with the high school recently because we're in the building project phase, and we actually had a presentation to the community a few weeks back on the conditions of the current building, and that presentation really pointed out a lot of flaws at Nashoba High School with accessibility to learning spaces. It is one of the major factors of why we're going to the Massachusetts School Building Authority and trying to partner with them to build a new high school. So I'll give you a simple example. In the courtyards, we have those step down areas. If you are wheelchair bound, you cannot access that area. There's no ramp or ability to get you into those spaces. And we recognize that we have those. So that is squarely on the agenda. And as we look to the building of the new high school, it is a priority to ensure that we are ADA compliant and that we are providing accessibility across the building for all students, faculty, visitors. So look for that to come. In terms of the other buildings in our district, we're in much better shape than the high school because those buildings are much newer in their construction. And I would say next to the high school, Hale might be a building that is less accessible than the others, but the like Center Schools is a virtually new school, so we don't have much. When we do have accessibility issues that arise, they would come to our facilities department, and our director of facilities, Mr. Rob Frieswick, works swiftly to try to address anything that might be broken, like an elevator, for instance. If it's out of commission, can we get the vendors in quickly to address those kind of things? So it's in terms of then heating, cooling, Wi-Fi accessibility, et cetera. Our Wi-Fi accessibility across the district is going to greatly improve when we have the new high school. because we're going to be building a new bandwidth network with that as part of the project. So right now, there are times, and as a matter of fact, I had a meeting with Dr. Boynton just yesterday where she had to change locations because her video feed kept cutting out. So those big cement steel walls that are in the high school have a hard time penetrating the signal. But then we also have problems where many devices, say in the cafeteria area, will go to one hub. So while we may have lots and lots of bandwidth, think of it this way. If you're on 117 trying to get to the highway may be free, lots of space, very few cars and whatnot, but you may be in a long line of traffic trying to get into the highway because there's a lot of cars trying to get there, right? That's kind of what happens in spaces like our cafeteria when we have 100 kids in there and all their devices are trying to attach to that one hub that's in their area. It can't get to the bandwidth to utilize it. So we're studying those things. When we have those problems, we notify our director of technology, Mr. Suchi, and we try to resolve that there. So I've actually had that same problem in my office at town hall at times that we've tried to resolve. So these are things that we continually study as they're reported to us. And we count on our teachers, our principals, our students to notify us of when there are issues so that we can respond to them quickly.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
We really greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
So our next question is from Cadence.
Great.
She's
Hi,
a
Cadence.
junior Neshoba.
Cadence, it's nice to meet you.
Hi, it's nice to meet you too. I'm Cadence Murphy. I'm a junior at Neshoba Regional High School. So my question is, it is not always possible to engage in open dialogue with a teacher.
Yeah.
What can the district do to ensure that students are comfortable and able to openly speak with their teachers?
Cadence, this is such a great question. I've been thinking about this one a lot as well. I'll share some thoughts through a story, and because ultimately the relationships that you build with students are going to be the gateways to which you can then open up and understand a student's situation. And I was told a story of a student who is a Black student that had a negative experience, and it wasn't talking about it. It was through the relationship with this trusted adult that the student began to talk. And as they talked, they began to build trust. And from that trust, the student was able to tell the trusted adult about more experiences that were harmful. So that's the first place. So we got to think about in the school system, and as I talked about our strategic plan earlier, how do we take the things that we're doing and really strengthen our relationships and trusted adult work across the entire school system so that every student in the school system has somebody as an asset in their life that they know they can go to and talk to. That's first and foremost. That I think is the most important thing. So we're doing some work with that in terms of some of the PD that we did this year with our teachers, but also some of the work that we will do next year with social emotional learning professional development, as well as diversity, equity, inclusion work we're going to be doing next year. I think another thing to think about in terms of helping students, and that I'm studying right now, is do we have some access points? In other words, there are, sorry, I'm losing light on my screen. There are some software out there that we can, for instance, maybe put a button on the front of the web page, and students can go to that place and be able to click there to reach out to say, I need some help with a problem. I can't approach a person about it, and I need to talk about this. There are some mechanisms like that that we can utilize in some organizations that we can utilize with that as well. So I think the reach out is critically important, and it's got to be steeped in those relationships for us to really connect with students.
That sounds amazing, and it will.
Thank you, James.
amazing to see these supports in action. So thank you so much.
You bet.
Our next question will be asked by Hallie Farmer, who is a senior at Nashoba Regional High School.
Thank you, Cadence. Yes, I'm the one senior. I'm here. Nice to meet you,
Hallie.
Nice to meet you too. Yes. My question is that how do you plan to unite teachers both within and across departments and encourage interdisciplinary teaching methods, for example, professional learning teams?
Yeah. So when I hear you say by departments, it sounds like it's really kind of a high school based question you're thinking about here. Yeah. This is a great question, and it's something that I've talked with our committee about recently, and I talked to the strategic planning group yesterday about, and that within the strategic work we designed, we have got to look at what are the methods we're using in our professional learning communities that are steeped in understanding the learning of our students academically, socially, and emotionally. What I will tell you is when it's most effective is when you have a team of teachers working together interdependently to reach a common goal. And that's the trick, isn't it? That's the trick, is getting everyone to work together. That when we write curriculum, for instance, we don't write the curriculum for ourselves. We're writing it for the students. And so if we're going to be doing everything we need to do for the students, let's share that with each other, because ultimately the curriculum belongs to the students. It belongs to them so that they can develop the skills, the competencies, the attributes, the knowledge to take into whatever the next phase of their life is going to be. So I think in terms of this notion of uniting teachers, I will have to say I've had some conversations with many teachers at the high school. And I think our teachers are united. I think sometimes they have disagreements. And I think sometimes, when we look at interdisciplinary work, we get stuck in sort of our habits of mind as opposed to thinking about possibilities. So I'll tell you a couple of the possibilities I'm thinking about. And that is, let's talk about the synergies between industrial ed, tech ed programs and the arts programs. Can we develop course pathways in technical theater where students are learning coding, programming, lighting skills with the drama department that's putting on performances, and commingle these things, and perhaps developing in the future an English course that is also focused on studio production. So students are learning the skills and competencies they need in their English work. They could be doing content that is scientific or in the social sciences, but learning the technical skills through video and TV production in a formal way. These are questions these are conversations we're having right now. The feasibility conversations we had in February were outstanding in setting the table for this. I know the high school faculty will be working with Dr. Frank Locker on May 20th. When you all go home at noon, they'll be staying back at school and working with Dr. Locker on all those, on just the very things that you're talking about. Because I do think, we can be thinking in humanities mindsets, in STEM mindsets, and integrated arts mindsets, and be thinking about it in terms of, what is the project and how do all of our disciplines impact that project? So we're having these conversations. We are trying to put that vision together right now. And what I would say, Hallie, is if I put forward to you tonight, this is what we're going to do, I would be disregarding all the fabulous educators we have at Neshoba Regional High School. We need to do that work together and bring a collection of voices together to that work. Because if we want to unite in that work, we have to unite in the creation of the vision of that work as well.
I just wanted to point out, I loved everything you were saying. And as a senior, I was kind of thinking like the college mindset, kind of like integrating all of these different courses together. And I I really admire that, and I admire like integrating like the math and like humanities department.
Yeah.
Because that would be really interesting.
You know, Hallie, the other night at the community forum on the building project, I shared a story about my daughter who is a freshman at Roger Williams University. And she shared with me a story. I went to pick her up because she was coming home for a weekend. And we have a very sort of tongue-in-cheek, self-deprecating kind of humor between us. And she says, Dad, the craziest thing happened today. And I said, what? She's like, these kids thought I was smart. And I said, what are you talking about? They thought you were smart. And I said, no, seriously, like, what happened? And she had come out of her science class, and it was a geology-based class. And she's been doing very well, Hallie. And when she came out, she heard these three kids say, let's ask her the answer. She's the smart one, right? The reason why I share that, like why that was so important to her, is that her middle school into high school experience, she didn't take AP classes and she didn't take the honors courses. And her high school, I live in another town, her high school experience taught her this is the box that she belongs in. And it wasn't until she got to college that learned about, in this class actually happens to be an interdisciplinary class because she's studying to be a special education student. She desires to work with autistic students when she graduates college. But it's an interdisciplinary class that is workshop based, that has lots of collaboration, communication, teamwork in it. And in that way, she found out, wait a second, I can fit into that kind of mold. And I am a smart person. It's just the system I was in didn't allow me to show it. And I think what our desires are in terms of thinking about things in an interdisciplinary way is to help our students see early on, no, there's many ways to go about solving and thinking about problems and learning. So we're going to be focused on competencies moving forward. You'll learn more about that. So Hallie, I hope you come back to us after your or throughout your college experience and tell us how we helped you prepare and tell us how we can be better at the same time.
I 100% will. I'll be pretty close by. I'll still be in Massachusetts and going over to UMass Amherst. So I'm excited.
Well, you may see my daughter there because she's thinking of transferring to UMass.
Oh, really? That's so fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was awesome talking to you. Thank you so much for
you.
answering my question. And the next person who will be asking a question is Theona Tully, who is a junior at Neshoba.
Yep.
Hi, Mr.
Theona.
Downing. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you again, Theona. Would you excuse me for a second? I just want to turn this light on so people can see me better.
Okay.
The sun has gone down, so the lighting in my room has changed a little bit.
Yeah, the same's happened over here.
Yep.
So my question is, how does the district plan to recruit a more diverse pool of candidates for teaching and student service positions?
Oh boy, I've been asking this question, and I've been tapping into some of my professional resources on how to do just that. In our community, as you know, we are predominantly white community. We see that in our hallways. We see that in our teaching staff. We see that in our administrative staff. And so I've reached out to some colleagues that are professionals and experts, colleagues of color that have done research and presented dissertations on these topics. The number one thing that they said is that they've advised me to do is, I'm not shy to share. One is Henry Turner. He is the Newton North principal that does a lot of great work around equity in our state. A key component is going to be entering into the circles where our educators of color network and fostering relationships with them so that you can develop a relational component where people then gain interest in the work and understand that Nashoba Regional is a place where anyone can come teach, and we're going to embrace you for the values that you bring into the school system. We can do a little bit through how we post our positions to show that we are a district that values diversity, whether it's your skin color, your body shape, your sexual orientation, so on and so forth, that we value you and we want that perspective to come so we can learn from you. So in our posting language, I've adjusted posting language in our positions that we send out in hopes of attracting that. That was another recommendation that came forward. As we move forward in our work in the strategic plan, that's going to be a key element within that, is how do we improve our strategies? I will tell you it's difficult sometimes because I think there's safety in a network of people when you share common culture and value. And in my previous job, we lost a lot of good candidates that we were offering positions to. And those candidates were taking jobs in school systems where there were more people that looked like them and shared an experience with them. So that's an added challenge. But I think what you do is you just continue to be persistent. And then as you draw on that experience, get folks to talk about that our school system is a welcoming school system for all. Because I think, Fiona, if we're going to be the kind of school system that prepares our kids to go out beyond our town, beyond the makeup of what we see in our high school, and have the social skills to navigate a variety of rooms across fields, across our country, across the world, we can't just teach to what we see around us. We have to teach to the things we don't see around us so that we are preparing. And we do that by bringing in a talented field of people from a lot of diverse backgrounds to do that. It's a challenge, but we're going to be persistent in how we go about it.
That's wonderful. I love how you are getting input from other people in constructing a plan. That's great. Olivia is going to be asking our next question.
Thank you. Hi, Olivia.
Hi, I'm back.
Good to
How
see
are
you
you feeling
again.
so far?
Oh, doing great. Doing great.
Awesome. You ready for your next question? Nice. All right. So, how do discipline policies in the district accommodate the varying home lives and out-of-school experiences that impact students' participation in school? And how can students safely advocate for themselves about these concerns?
You know, this is a question that had me thinking and needing to ask a follow-up to this in terms of discipline policies. So, Olivia, do you know where the construct of this question came from?
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of our conversations with other students were revolving around how some students have to drive to school with their parents, and sometimes being tardy isn't exactly their fault. But at the same time, there is still punitive action taken for being tardy, even if the circumstances of that tardiness isn't known.
Got it. And that's a tricky situation. I do know that I think, so we have the policies, right? And we have to have policies so that we have standards for our code of conduct, for our attendance, for safety in the schools. We're bound to have school attendance. You know, there are laws on school attendance that we have to follow. So if you have students that are being transported, but they're not getting there because the adults in their lives can't get there, I would hope that our educators are working with those families to find remedies to what those problems are. Because Olivia, it sounds to me like what you're saying is, and I'm not asking you to give specifics because we don't want to out anybody, but it sounds what you're saying is there's some students that are feeling penalized because their parents can't get them to school. And in having those
that's a specific.
As a
sorry
specific
to cut you
one.
off.
Yeah, as a specific one, right? So I think the dialogue with that is going to be working with families on that. We need to have standards in the policies, as I said, but we also need to have some dialogue and input reason into those policies at the same time. to get down to what the essence of the situation is. Consequences are teachers, teaching moments to a degree. They're operant strategies. And operant strategies of rewards and punishments can be effective, but they're effective for really low level skills. So we think of the classic timeout for the 2-year-old because maybe they're throwing things at the dog. I don't know. The dog is sitting here, which is why I'm thinking about it. However, when we're talking about complex behaviors, complex situations, operant strategies like punishments or rewards tend to have less effect. And there's research there to prove that. Some good research around that is the classic bonus in business is actually proven not to be a major factor in work production, right? So what is I'm going to come back to this again. It's meaningful relationships with people and being able to sit down and dialogue and then drill down through a series of questions. What is the root cause of the issue that is happening so that maybe we can do some work at that root cause as opposed to using strategies like punishments, detentions for late tardies or something. So I think there's a relational component that has to go into how the discipline policy is applied. Now, the second part of your question was around, so let's kind of transfer that in a general way to other types of situations. We took what is a sort of a low-hanging fruit situation, right? That one's easy to understand. But there could be other complexities that are happening out there. For instance, if the student is falling asleep in class all the time, that's actually, and they're like not getting their homework turned in. Well, do we know what's going on there? Is there some things going on at home? Is maybe the student helping to support the family by working at night and isn't getting their homework done because they're working till midnight? Then they get up and they try to get to school, but maybe try to get up at 6 o'clock to get their homework done, but can't get, there are stories like that we have out there that are true. So we need to be empathetic and ask good questions around that. Now, the next piece is around sort of that advocacy piece and building self-advocacy in our students. And so this is where we get into thinking about that self-advocacy competency. Does the student have a trusted adult that they could go to talk about that? So let's say I'm the person that has imposed the consequence for whatever the situation of the violation of the discipline code. And Olivia, you have to come in for a detention. My hope is that you would be able to go to a trusted adult in the community. I'll just say Dr. Boynton in this case, and be able to say, can I talk to you about a problem I'm having? So we can get to the essence of that. Now, we have guidance counselors in the school, and that's their exact job. That's what they do, right? But I'm also not going to assume that every single student in our school feels like, yep, I can go right to the guidance counselor anytime I feel. I know that's not the case because we're human beings and we all connect and relate differently. So it doesn't have to be a guidance counselor. It could be your science teacher. It could be a coach. It could be a support staff person. It could be an administrator. Can we build that trusted adult so that you, Olivia, could express, hey, this is why I'm not able to get to school in the morning. And maybe that person could say, hey, maybe we can sit down with Mr. Downing and put our heads together on how to solve this so that doesn't happen anymore. So again, I think it comes back to relations, self-advocacy, and trusted adult work is a key aspect in helping solving some of those problems.
I noticed that you really emphasize the building of relationships within the community, and I definitely think that's a really important part of supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion because all of us have a responsibility to work towards that goal, and if there isn't trust, there isn't a basis for us to work on. So thank you for bringing up that point.
Yeah, trust is a huge thing, and trust has to be earned, and I'm learning that in my role as superintendent, that in messaging and talking about some of the things that I've talked about, that's gained a lot of trust in others. It's created a lot of questions in some others. And it's through conversations that we can get down to the essence of some of those things.
Our next question will be presented by Izzy Hess, who is also a student at Neshoba.
Yes. Hi, Izzy.
Hi, I'm Izzy Hess. I'm a senior at Nashoba. The next question is, what structures is the district putting in place to help teachers and students be more strong and direct in addressing homophobic, racist, and cultural slurs in the buildings? And how does the district plan to impact school culture and climate in this way?
Yeah, this is a big question. I was having a conversation today, Izzy, about, let's just say, aggressions, macro and micro aggressions. And sometimes they're intentional, sometimes they're not intentional. However, they all have impact, right? So what we're trying to do through some of the social emotional work that we're doing with our faculty and staff, and what we will continue to do next year, is begin to look at what is the impact of those moments when they happen, and how can we support students. But I'm going to tell you as well, Izzy, it's not just students, it's adults too. And let's just come back to one of the themes that the meeting opened with. This is a human issue. And so it's working with humans and understanding that our words and the things that we say impact others, and they can impact others in ways that hurt. What are the signals that we can give that say, hey, you can come talk to me about that issue? In my signature for my weekly addresses, I do include my pronouns. I offer that because I want to know if there are members of my teaching community, my student community, my parent community, where gender identity is a question that they feel marginalized toward. By having my pronouns, I'm signaling I'm a safe person you can come talk to. I'm not trying to impart anything. This is no agenda. It just says, here's my signal. And I didn't invent that idea. That idea came to me because someone who was non-binary explained it to me as, this is how it can help somebody like me. And so it's those types of things that we need to do that are going to signal safety, to have the kind of conversations we need to have to address the kind of issues that you brought up in your question. And another thing that we need to be thinking about, Izzy, is connected to our implicit bias. So, or let's just say unconscious bias. Sometimes they're used interchangeably. There's a story I listened to that I shared with two of your leaders, Abby and Kelly, about a story that I listened to on NPR, and this author was just talking about unconscious bias and said, and the question was, well, how do you tap into your unconscious bias? And she said, well, you can't, because it's unconscious. But what you can tap into is your feelings. So if you come up into a situation and you feel a certain way, that's a signal that your unconscious bias is advancing forward. And so that makes me think about, okay, so when I enter a room and I feel discomfort without having had any words with anybody, why am I feeling that discomfort? Can I look around and then ask myself, am I feeling discomfort because of the orientation of the room, for instance? To get to that place, there's a lot of work that has to be done in terms of having some honest conversations, courageous conversations, where people can come forward to say, you know what, I'm going to do some work to develop and deepen my understanding of that, so that others can feel safety in the environment as well. So this is, again, continual work. It's going to be continual work. My hope is we're going to look back later and say, 30 years ago, when the awful events of 2020 happened, we're going to look at that as a landmark time where people really began to look more deeply at themselves. And we made some significant progress over that period of time.
Thank you so much. The next question is going to be asked by Molly.
Hello again.
Hi, Molly.
So the final question for tonight is, how is the district incorporating restorative justice practices within schools?
Yeah, so that's a good question in terms of restorative justice practices. And just to talk very basically about it, restorative justice is when some type of harm or injustice has happened. How do we host conversations in a way that restore the relational connections, restore safety, restore trust, so that students can go about and adults can go about their daily learning lives feeling respected and safe in their community. So restorative practices and restorative justice, there's frankly many out there. There's the quote unquote restorative justice where you get together and it's a methodology of solving and working through some problems. Molly, currently we don't have comprehensive training across our professionals in that practice. I'll just be honest with you about that. It is something that has come up in the data collection process of the work that we're constructing right now. So I anticipate we're going to be building some methodologies around that. We are going to be doing some work in the future with Dr. Larry Epstein on the calm compassion methods. And that is methods of when being dysregulated, how do we help? How do we ask? And how do we understand a situation that somebody's going through? And in that way, it's not a restorative practice, but it's based on the principles of trying to address dysregulation and those emotions that come from it that can turn into a situation that is not just. So that's more on the preventative side, whereas restorative justice, restorative practices are on the other side after a scenario is. So if we're going to do some things in our school system to really work on just the overall climate and culture of our school, you got to do it before, during, and after a particular event, because that's where the skills are built. I will say, Molly, that in looking at some of the survey data from the Neshoba regional students, that one of the largest percentages of assets that the students cited in the survey was that relationship with their teachers and adults in the school. So I'm happy to say that we actually, our population is telling us that a large majority of our students feel like they have that, but we do have a percentage that don't. And so we got to be very proactive about those students, because this is one of those things where the metric is 100%. It needs to be, because if we're leaving a student who is marginalized or impacted, or something unjust has happened upon them, we got to look closely at that and work to that place of improvement. But we're not perfect either. We're human beings, and we try our best to get to those places. And I offer that to you just as a learner myself along the way. So thank you, Molly.
Thank you so much, Mr. Downing, and I 100% agree. So for our closing tonight, we have our amazing president, Olivia Huang.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Downing, for your insightful responses and your candor. I would like to say that the changes that you talked about implementing in the district are being noticed by students. Sometimes we'll notice something is different and we'll talk to each other and be like, hey, this is different. We really like this. So I just wanted to let you know that your work and the teachers' work and the administrators' work, it is being noticed in the district by the students. So thank you so much.
You bet, Olivia. And I hope you take the opportunity to share that with Dr. Boynton, her staff, with the teachers. Those are the people that are really doing the work. My role as superintendent is to lead and to ensure that we're hosting the conversations and addressing the things that we address. And we try to do our best. Again, I don't profess to be perfect. We're trying to do our best, but I'm going to share your words with Dr. Boynton to share with her staff as well, because that's much appreciated.
Yes, and I'll definitely be stopping by Dr. Boynton's office to let her know myself. The points you made tonight, especially about human empathy and looking at societal tensions from a human point of view, building community and connections within the community, I feel like they're very pertinent to the challenges and the solutions that our community as a school district and even as a global community have to look at and sort of build the solutions to. Just to wrap up, thank you again to everyone who tuned in tonight, and please do check out the NASJA and Students for Social Justice social media pages. Our tags are along the bottom of the screen. If you would like to get involved, feel free to reach out. Thank you to NASJA for organizing this event and to all the students and community members who participated tonight. And thank you so much to Superintendent Downing for talking with us tonight. We look forward to continuing to work with you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to all the students that came out tonight. And thank you both to Abby and Kelly for the invitation. It was my pleasure.